friends, Krista here. Thank you so much for stopping by my channel today. Whether you're new or been here a while, I'm glad you're here. Today we're going to be talking about some historical fiction recommendations. Historical fiction is my favorite genre. I do read a little bit of everything, but my go-to, my favorite, the ones that mean the most to me usually are historical fiction. And it's been years since I've done a video recommending non-World War II historical fiction. And so I've had this pile of books sitting in this room for quite a while because I pulled the books a while ago and I just haven't sat down to film it. And I was really wondering how I was going to sort them and share them with you. And then the other day I saw a video by Shelley Swearingen, I will link it in the description below, where she is hosting a month-long historical fiction readathon in the month of June. So I'm like, perfect, let me watch this video. So I watched it and she's got a number of different prompts or challenges. And so I sorted the books according to the prompts for the readathon. So I'm really excited. It's similar to Nonfiction November and Middle Grade March, where if you just read one historical fiction, you've participated in historical fiction readathon. I have lots of recommendations here for you of books that you might want to pick up. Again, these are all going to be books that are not World War II related. They might be focused on a war in some way, but not World War II. I know the market is flooded with World War II historical fiction, which I personally still love, and maybe need to do a video of World War II recommendations, but for this video's purposes, we're not going anywhere near World War II. Let's dive into the challenges for the historical fiction readathon. I tried to get 2 or 3 books for each prompt. It didn't always work based on the books that I had already pulled, but for most of them, I think I did pretty good. So the first challenge is to read a book of historical fiction from the country where you're from. I'm from America, so I have a handful of books here. I do have Yellow Wife by Sadiqa Johnson. So good. This one is set here in Virginia, which I always love books that are set right in the state where I currently live. This one was so impactful. In this one, we do follow a young woman who is light-skinned. I don't remember if she's mixed or not, but she has kind of lived a sheltered life, not really fitting in with the enslaved people or the white people on her plantation where she lives. She ends up being forced to marry the jailer at Devil's Half Acre, which is a jail that was here in Richmond. There's no building there anymore, but there is a historical marker where Devil's Half Acre was, and it's an infamous prison. And she wields a little bit of influence there, but is also forced to do some things that she is not really thrilled about. Very emotional read. I need to not talk quite so much about all these books because there's a ton of them. The Orphan Collector by Ellen Marie Wiseman. This one is set in Philadelphia during the Spanish flu pandemic in early 1900s, 1918. We follow a young girl whose mother passes away. She tries to survive on her own, and an evil neighbor who ends up to be a really good villain. Like, not good in good versus bad, but good in that you love to hate her. Also, we have The Attic Child by Lola J. This one does go overseas a little bit, but the majority of the book happens here in America. And we follow 2 children, 2 timelines, both of whom are locked up in this attic for different reasons, but we see how their stories kind of interact with each other. Holy moly, this was such a good book. And then finally, we have, for America, set in America, The Giver of Stars by Jojo Moyes. This is about the Pack Horse Library Project. And in this particular one, almost like a found family, a sisterhood of women who are working in the same area. Loved this story. There's a bit of a mystery involved in there as well. Really love that one. So the next one is read a work of historical fiction set in a different country to the one you're from. The Girl with the Louding Voice by Abi Dare. This is set in Nigeria, and we follow a young girl who wants to be educated. The audiobook for this is fantastic, and check trigger warnings because there are some really, really difficult scenes in here, but I absolutely loved this. I loved Aduni, our main character, and her strength of will and the things that she has to go through. Like, I just really, really loved this book. And then also I have Indian Horse by Richard Wagamese. This one is set in Canada and revolves around some Indian boarding schools and a young boy named Saul Indian Horse, who was sent to the schools as a young boy. And we kind of follow him through, and it's written as if it were Saul's memoir. And it was really hard to remember that this was fiction because it was just done so well. Harrowing, heartbreaking, infuriating at times. And hockey plays a big part in this story as well. You don't have to love hockey to appreciate the book. I thought it was really, really well done. The third challenge is to read a work of historical fiction set in a time period that's kind of new to you. And I actually have 3 books set in Afghanistan because it's not something I knew very much about, the conflict in Afghanistan. It did happen in my lifetime, some of it. And so I don't know what your qualifications for historical fiction are, but it was in the 1970s, most of these, I think. I have 2 books by Khalid Hosseini. The first one is The Kite Runner. This one is probably the more popular one. It was made into a film adaptation. We follow 2 young boys who are separated because of conflict and some horrible situations there. And then A Thousand Splendid Suns, I actually think I liked even a little better than The Kite Runner. In this one, we follow a young woman who's arranged to be the second wife of this man, second or third, I forget. It really revolves around the women at this time. Both of these are fantastic, also very harrowing reads, which I think is kind of typical of historical fiction. They're often going to be set during tragic times or tragic circumstances. I don't know. And then the other Afghanistan book that I really love is Sparks Like Stars by Nadia Hashimi. I think this one is fantastic. We follow a young girl who is raised in Afghanistan before the communist takeover and then the Taliban, and she escapes to America. We learn a little bit about her time here, and then as an adult woman, she wants to return to Afghanistan, and it's a very, very different country that she remembered as a child. So this one, oh my word, I really loved her writing. I loved the story. I loved learning about Afghanistan. It's not a place I've been to or know very much about, so I feel like those 3 qualify for that challenge for sure. The next category I only have 2 books for, and it's to read a work of historical fiction that has a speculative or magical realism aspect to it. And I only have 2 for that. And the first one is What the Wind Knows by Amy Harmon. This one takes place in Ireland. In particular, I don't know if there was like a name for the war, but when Ireland and England are really fighting, and when Northern Ireland is kind of fighting with the rest of Ireland, and all of the conflict there, but it does have some time travel. So at the beginning, we follow this young woman, and her grandfather is dying, and they're very, very close. And she travels back to the time period that she had heard her grandpa talking about in Ireland for so long. So a bit of a romance in there as well, but definitely historical fiction set in Ireland. Really good. I love Amy Harmon. And the other one is As Long as the Lemon Trees Grow by Zulfa Kato. This one is set in Syria. This is a YA. And the speculative magical realism aspect of this one is that there is a character in here that is a not figment of her imagination, but it's a projection of her anxiety and fear. And that character influences our main character's decisions and her mental state. And yeah, so there is an aspect of magical realism, if you will, in here as well. So well done. I really loved that one as well. I loved all of these, which is why I'm recommending them to you. The next challenge is to read a work of historical fiction from an ordinary person's point of view. And I have a couple for that. I have The House is on Fire by Rachel Beanland. This one we follow 5 different perspectives around all surrounding a theater fire that happened in 1811 here in Richmond. And at the time, it was a huge tragedy, even written about in across the country in world newspapers at the time. We follow 5 different people and their different experiences surrounding the fire. So one of them is a young boy who works with a theater company. One is a wealthy young lady. One is an enslaved woman who works for that wealthy young lady. A guy who did not go to the theater but helps rescue people. Like, we kind of get all of these different perspectives, which give a really well-rounded picture of what happened that evening. So good. I really loved it. I have to stop saying that. Take My Hand by Dolan Perkins Valdez follows a nurse, a young woman who becomes a nurse in 1973. And this book is going to deal with forced sterilization, race issues amongst the welfare social services system. Very, very good. And then The Four Winds by Kristen Hanna, in which we follow a woman, her struggle living in the Midwest in the time of the Dust Bowl. So this takes place in the 1920s into the 1930s. And oh man, it's a hard one. And then she ends up heading to California and the migration that happened headed out west. Ordinary people living through really difficult times. The next one is read a work of historical fiction from the perspective of an extraordinary person. I mean, all of these people that you read about feel like they could be extraordinary. Maybe I'll talk about, I think it's out in the other room, The Frozen River by Ariel Lahan is about the true life story of Martha Ballard, who was a midwife in early America, and she was pretty extraordinary. And that was a fantastic read. In Shelley's video, she talked about tutors and Philippa Gregory and like people who were notorious, but also famous because of their position. And I couldn't think of any off the top of my head characters or books that were told from those perspectives. So I didn't have anything for that. The seventh challenge is to read a historical mystery or a historical romance. And I'm going to talk about 2 more Amy Harmon books because her books often do have romances in them. So Where the Lost Wander by Amy Harmon is set in Western migration, kind of Oregon Trail vibes for sure. But the main 2 characters have a romance in this one, and it was lovely. And then also A Girl Called Samson by Amy Harmon. There is a romance at the center of this story as it goes on as well. I won't really go into it too much, but this one we follow Deborah Sampson, who pretended to be a boy so that she could fight in the Revolutionary War. There's a romance there. And then also this is a YA, The Fountains of Silence by Ruta Sepetys. This is set during the Spanish Civil War, and there is a romance at the center of this story as well. The final category is to read a classic work of historical fiction, and I don't read a ton of classics, but I have 3 that maybe could be considered modern classics. They're all a little bit older. I don't know. I might be pushing the envelope on this a little, but I wanted to include these 3 and they fit best, I think, in this category. So we have Kindred by Octavia E. Butler. Octavia E. Butler is one of the first, I believe, Black women to write science fiction, but in Kindred does have time travel. So this could have been included as well in the speculative magical realism kind of aspect because of the time travel. But this one is set in the 1970s as well as pre-Civil War South. I don't know. And we follow a young Black woman who gets transported back in time. Unbeknownst to her, that's what happened. And she keeps going back to rescue this boy when his life is in danger. That's what brings her back in time. And we kind of see the connection of these 2 people as the story goes on. Holy moly, this book was so good. The last 2 that I have are kind of, I wouldn't say biblical fiction, but they are both set in kind of ancient Israel and set during the time of Bible times or the early church. The first one is The Red Tent by Anita Diamant. And in this one, we follow the life of Dinah. So this is kind of biblical fiction, sort of. Not necessarily from a Christian worldview, however. So Dinah is the only daughter, I believe, that's mentioned, born to Jacob, who had 12 sons, famous 12 tribes of Israel. But he had a daughter named Dinah, and this really chronicles the lives of women at that time period. And the red tent is kind of not symbolic. It's actually where they would go during their time of the month, and really focuses on the lives of the women and the attitudes of the women, and really, really liked that one. It was just a different kind of perspective on that time period. As well, I really loved The Dove Keepers by Alice Hoffman. This is also set in ancient Israel. This is based on the true events of a group of Jewish people. 900 Jews held out for months against the armies of Romans on Masada, which is a mountain in the desert of Judea. The Romans came and were conquering Israel at the time, and these Jews were hiding out and living up on this mountain. The Romans came and attacked them, and it ended up being like a mass suicide. All of them ended up being dead when the Romans finally broke through the stronghold. Whew, was that a good one as well? So there are a whole bunch of historical fiction recommendations. Again, I will link Shelley's video about the historical fiction readathon in June if you would like to participate. I probably will read historical fiction, but I'm not sure I'm going to follow any of the actual prompts. But it was a fun way to categorize these books that I wanted to talk to you about today. I would love to hear one or two of your favorite non-World War II historical fiction as well. There are so many more I could have mentioned, but these are just the ones that I that jumped out to me on my shelves when I was looking for books to recommend to you today. So I hope that you enjoyed this video. Thank you so much for watching and spending a few minutes with me. I can't wait to talk with you in the comments and hear more of your recommendations. And I look forward to talking with you in another video very soon. Bye.